The Fourth Stall, Chapter 27. Staples looked down at me for a few moments. The sun was almost directly behind his head, and his face just appeared as a black silhouette. Even though I couldn't see it, I was pretty sure he was smiling. Then he reached down and grabbed the collar of my shirt and lifted me into the air. I twisted around to see if his posse was really going to let him do this, and that's when I saw perhaps the greatest sight I've ever seen. There was a bike gang heading our way down the gravel road. The bikes may have been the bikes may have been pedal bicycles and not huge chopper motorcycles, and they were ridden by a bunch of kids instead of big muscular dudes with tattoos and black leather. But to me, it was all the same at that point. The caravan consisted of 6 riders. In the lead was a really little kid on a small bike. As they drew nearer, I was finally able to make out who it was. Fred. Fred was leading the charge, and behind him rode Vince, Joe, Nubby, Great White, and Kitten. Staples dropped me to the ground and turned to face the newcomers. What the? Everybody turned as the 6 bikes skidded to a stop in quick succession on the dirt. It was really cool as the dirt sprayed up in front of them. Then Nubby, the last one to stop, accidentally went too far and his front wheel hit Joe's bike, and he toppled off and sprawled onto the ground head first. It's kind of ruined the moment a little. The 4 high school kids laughed, but Staples just stared as Nubby quickly climbed back to his feet. What do we have here, a dork convention? One of the high school kids said, and then laughed. Nobody else laughed with him. I think they might have been too busy warily eyeing what I had just noticed. My 6 rescuers had weapons strapped across their backs. But as they dismounted their bikes and armed themselves, I noticed that they didn't exactly bring real weapons. Vince, for instance, had a plastic snow shovel. Fred held a long, skinny tree branch out in front of him. But in all honesty, it was just a gnarly twig that would probably shatter if hit by a light breeze. Joe had one of those thick foam noodles that kids sometimes bring to the swimming pool. Nubby held a giant rubber trout with a missing dorsal fin and bite marks all over it, as if it got hungry and chewed on it during the bike ride. At least Great White had a gun. The only problem was that it was a water gun. I especially questioned his choice of weapons. It's not like Staples was a witch who'd melt when sprayed with water. But then again, Great White was there to help me. They all were, and that's what mattered most. Kitten was the only one who looked like he was used to picking out effective weapons. He had a really nasty looking rusty lawn rake. That didn't surprise me. You could always count on Kitten to bring a flamethrower to roast a marshmallow. My friends lined up in front of us about 20 feet away. Staples stood with PJ and the other 3 high school kids between my rescuers and me. The searing sun shone on the classic showdown. I was so proud of my crew. I didn't know how they'd done it, but they'd somehow found out where I was, and then rode out the few miles on their bikes, and now they were apparently ready to fight for me, even if they weren't really equipped for it. The 2 sides stared at each other. The only noise was that of a few birds singing about whatever they had to sing about. Then finally the silence was broken. Let him go, Staples. It was Vince. What or what? You'll beat me up with your little toys? Staples said with a smirk. Yeah, kind of. I guess that's what would happen, Vince said. He never is too good at confrontations, like I've said before. You'll be sorry if you hurt him, Staples, Nubby said, looking pretty intimidating for a 7th grader holding a rubber trout. Ooh, will I? Staples said with a sneer. That's when Kitten did what Kitten does best, something crazy. He walked a few steps over to the black Honda with the huge spoiler. He raised the rake above his head, then held it there for a moment while everybody watched. Then he slammed it into the roof of the car. In the empty yard, the clang was deafening. No, PJ screamed. I heard some of his buddies say things that would have made my mom faint. Kitten dragged the rake across the roof, and the scratching noise made us all wince and grit our teeth, except for Staples. He just stood there smiling. Kitten finished, and the screeches faded. It was hard to see from my spot. We all knew there were some nasty scratches on the car. One of the most disturbing smiles I'd ever seen spread slowly across Kitten's face like an expanding pool of blood. I think the rest of us in the yard got chills up our spines all at the same time. Pitten made a move to go after Kitten, but the little psycho raised the rake again. Stay where you are, or I'll do the back window next, he said in a small, quiet voice. PJ complied as if he had been barked at by a drill instructor. Kitten's arms shook slightly, not from nerves, I don't think, but from excitement. He wanted PJ to keep coming at him. so he could smash the back window. Now let him go, or we'll make that car look like a piece of Swiss cheese, Nubby said. Staples laughed. He rocked back on his heels and then shook his head. Go ahead, do it. I don't care, he said. There was dead silence. I think my crew didn't really know what to do. Then Kitten shrugged and raised the rake again. Okay, we will. Wait, PJ yelled. Wait! You know what? I'm out of here. Don't hurt my baby. I need it. Just. He took his car keys from his pocket and moved toward the car. He opened the driver's side door. Yeah, I'm going to Staples. I got a baseball scholarship, said another of the high school kids. Yeah, I don't really want to get my nose raked off by some psycho little kid. I got a pretty face, right? Said the high school kid with the spiky blonde hair. Sorry, Staples. The three of them got into the black Honda. The car backed up into the gravel road and then sped away, leaving a trail of dust behind it. Staples stared at it silently. Let him go, Staples. You're outnumbered, Vince said. My men all took a few steps towards Staples. That's when he hauled me up by my shirt again. He wrapped an arm around my neck and squeezed. I struggled to breathe, and I felt the blood rush to my face. His other hand took out his phone, and he flipped it open. What are you doing? Vince asked. I'm calling in an anonymous tip, Staples said calmly. To who? Vince asked, looking a little worried. Here's the thing, Staples said as his fingers pressed the keys on his phone. Everyone thinks you're all so perfect, that I'm a delinquent and you're just these saints, when in fact, we're not all that different. But now they're all going to see you for who you really are, a bunch of scheming, greedy rich kids who spend too much time and with no accountability. I didn't like where this was headed. Yeah, I'd like to speak to Principal Dickerson, Staples said into the phone. Sure, I'll hold. Staples' arms stayed gripped around my neck, not too hard that I couldn't breathe, but it hurt. Wait, Staples, maybe we can work something out, Vince said, panic rising in his voice. He knew as well as I did that if Staples directed Dickerson to our office in the East Wing bathroom, we'd all be expelled. Oh, yeah, Staples said. I doubt it. I looked at my would-be rescuers. They looked at each other, unsure what to do. I didn't see Great White. During the commotion, he somehow snuck off. I hoped Staples wouldn't notice. And whatever Great White was doing, he had a plan. We can start negotiating by you telling me where you took my money, Staples said. Everybody seemed unsure what to do next. Vince also knew he couldn't tell him that because then Staples would likely still turn us in and we'd lose our leverage. I relaxed a little bit. I was going to conserve my energy. Vince stepped forward as the others stepped back. He held up his hands in front of him. Look, Staples, don't do anything crazy, okay? Let's just talk about this. We didn't actually kidnap your dog. He's just fine, okay? Vince said. Oops, too late, Staples said. The secretary's connecting me now. We all waited, and I don't think anybody breathed. So this was it. It was all over. Yes, Mr. Dickerson, Staples said into the phone. My head was close to Staples from where I was, and I heard Dickerson's unmistakable voice faintly from somewhere above me. Staples wasn't bluffing. He really had called the school. Yeah, I want to report some. That's when Great White struck. I heard a soft whizzing noise and felt liquid splash onto my face. It may have been only water from Great White's skirt going, but it had surprised Staples enough for him to loosen his grip on me ever so slightly. That was all I needed. I threw an elbow into his side and he dropped me completely. Ah, he grabbed his ribs and I rolled away from him. I heard the phone hit the ground, and then the others were upon him. Don't move, Nubby yelled. Staples tried to run, but Kitten got him first. I heard Kitten squeal like a little of a battle cry as he picked up his weapon, ready to rake Staples' face like it was a pile of leaves. He lunged from the handle end first, and the heavy wood cracked against Staples' kneecap. Staples hit the dirt hard and rolled on his back, moaning. I picked up his phone and hit the disconnect button while my crew surrounded him. I thought they were going to tenderize Staples like a choice cut sirloin the way they were approaching him. He was holding his knee where Kitten had hit him, but otherwise he looked calm, unafraid, like the kid who had already sunk lower than the punishment of a physical beating. Let us take him out, Mac. He's a lying sack of Kitten started. Hang on, I interrupted. We're not going to stoop to that level. In truth, it wasn't about stooping or not. I looked at Vince, and he had the strangest expression on his face, like he was miles away from the place. Then Vince looked right at me, and I saw it. Even with everything that had happened, he felt truly bad for Staples. After all, Vince knew what it was like to have to give money to parents and not have a dad around. Staples and Vince's situations weren't all that different, and they had grown up right near each other their whole lives. But still, we somehow had to make sure he wasn't going to turn us into Dickerson the first chance he got. We couldn't just let him go. Look, Staples, I said, I understand that you did all this because of your family situation, or you're trying to help out your dad, but that doesn't, you don't know anything, Staples interrupted. He sounded mad enough, he didn't sound mad, just empty. I'm not doing any of this for my loser dad. I waited for him to continue, and after a short silence, he did. I'm doing all of this for my sister. Of course, the picture I had seen in his office. He had looked just like a regular kid in that picture. I guess there was a time when he had been different, when things were better for him. My sister, he repeated. He wasn't talking directly at me or anybody. He was looking at the ground as if the dirt could talk back or would understand what he was going through. She was taken from us a few years ago. She lives with a foster family now. I'm only trying to help my dad get back on his feet so I can get my sister back for us, for me. But my dad, he just doesn't seem to care. I didn't know what to say. None of us did. So we waited for him to continue. But when he did finally, some life had come back in him, and he looked right at me, his face full of anger. But whether he was really mad at me or at his dad, I wasn't sure. Maybe both. All you rich kids, kids like you who have everything. You just don't get how easy you have it. You get everything. You have everything. You don't even think twice about it. You just go through life, and there's always stuff there, then family there, and you have everything so easily, and you don't even get it. Used to live right near you, Staples, at Bella Vista Trailer Park. Don't you remember? We even played football together a few times. Staples shook his head slightly and squinted at me. Don't remember and don't care to, Richie Miss McMoneybags. I sighed. I'm not Rich Staples, I said, but my words sounded empty, because he was right. I may have used to live near him in the same trailer park, but now I did have a lot easier than he did. Of course, it was easier for me to run a clean, successful business when I had no other worries in life, and all of the money I made could go right back into the business. And I had a real family, and I couldn't imagine what it would be like without them. I was rich, and he wasn't, and I had rubbed it in his face earlier in my office. He hardly had a family, didn't seem to have any real friends, and had a failing, corrupt business. No wonder he hated me so much. I looked at Vince again. He looked back at me, but he didn't have to. I knew exactly what I needed to do. This kid on the ground in front of me, who had tried to destroy my life, deserved some pro bono services. Look, Staples, how about we team up after all? I mean, not like in a cheesy way where we're now like best friends who hold hands and sing pop songs together while prancing through the meadow, but more so I'll be your business advisor. I can help you run your business better. I can help you make more money the right way. I'll even start you off with a business loan. You'll get your sister back. I will get your sister back for you. I don't need your help, he said, scoffing. She's my sister. I'm her brother. I can get her back on my own. I sighed and looked at Vince again. He just shrugged. Well, if you ever change your mind, you know where to find me, I said. In the meantime, I'm going to need to keep some of the stuff we found in your shed as collateral, the notebooks, dealings, bets you took, and other records that might prompt the authorities to look further into any other unsavory activities you might have going on. If you ever tip off Dickerson, then we'll have to tip off the cops about what you've been up to, and then you'll never get your sister back. He glared at me. Hey, I don't want to be like this, but I clearly can't trust you without any insurance, I said. I offered my help and you turned it down, so this is what we're left with. Yeah, whatever, Christian, Staples said. Keep that stuff. I don't care. I'm not going to say anything to anyone. He dropped his head again, making no effort to get up. He just ran his hand through the dirt as if digging for for some of the answer to all his problems. There was still an edge to his voice I didn't so much care for, but I could tell he wasn't going to fight anymore. He looked about as defeated and hopeless as the Cubs were of ever winning the World Series. The name's Mac, by the way, I said to him. Whatever, Mac, he said without looking up. You're not actually going to let him go. We're not actually going to let him go, are we? Kitten asked. I could tell he still wanted more payback for the shed incident. I could have made I would have to make it up to him with money once I got my funds back in my hands. Yes, it's not worth the trouble. Plus, he clearly hasn't gotten too many breaks in his life. Everybody needs a break once in a while. Staples scoffed at this, but I think it was more of an agreement than what I'd said than anything else. Let's go, I said. We all walked back to the bikes. Staples just sat there on the ground, staring at the dirt, with a blank look in his eyes. He looked like a broken toy. By the way, I said as we approached the bikes, what's with your weapons? You couldn't find anything that might have actually scared them? Nubby laughed and waved his trout chew toy at me. Hey, we were in a hurry. This was the only stuff we could find in Staples' shed on a short notice. Great White came running from behind a nearby tree now that it was clear and the conflict was over. I owe you, I said. Bloody right you do, he said and laughed. A few thousand quid ought to do it. I chuckled, too, even though I knew he was kidding. I was going to have to pay them a pretty hefty sum for what they'd done for me. I wasn't really sure how many dollars or thousands or a few thousands quids would be, though. It would have been another one of those British things. Why the heck did you decide to bring a water gun anyway? I asked. Great White laughed. Hey, it worked, didn't it, mate? I grinned and nodded. He had at a point I couldn't really argue. That dumb water gun had probably saved my business, my permanent record, and my reputation. Before we left, I went to Staples' car and grabbed his car keys from the ignition. I shoved them into my pocket and then stood on the pegs on the back wheels of Vince's bike. I grabbed the backpack to steady myself. Let's go, I said, and we rode.